The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. Today we're talking about cannabis and tech, and my guest is a guy called Richard Skaife. Richard is co-founder in a company called Cobidol, which is a blockchain business for the cannabis industry. So without further ado, please enjoy. So today we've got Richard Skaife on the show. Richard's here to talk to us about cannabis and tech. Richard's background is in venture capital as both an operator and a partner, and has over 20 years experience in the tech industry. After a number of successful ventures, he's moving into the cannabis industry with a blockchain business called Cobidol, which we'll find out a bit more about later. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, how you doing?
Very good, thank you. So how's it all going? How's the wonderful world of cannabis treating you?
Good, yeah. I mean, we've been 6-7 months now on the technology development. It's that kind of period of a company's life where you don't really want to tell too many people about what you're doing. You really got your head down, and then you start to want to do the complete opposite, where you want to then go out and shout about what you've sort of been doing. And thankfully, we're now in the shout about what we're doing stage of the life of the business. But yeah, it's been great. I mean, such a really warm and welcoming community of people here in London and Europe. So I've been really, really lucky. And one of my co-founders has been involved in the sector for well over 10 years. We've known each other for 20 years, worked together in the past technology space. So yeah, I have a great business partner, friend and mentor. So yeah, my on-ramp into the sector is first class.
Great. So we'll hear more about Cobidol in a little bit. I'm going to be really noddy here, and this is mostly for me, but hopefully some of my listeners might find this useful as well, and ask you to explain various terms, one of which is venture capital. Can you explain exactly what that is? I think I have an idea, but it'd be useful for you to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, venture capital is an asset class which is, I don't know, I mean, now become more and more sort of aware. You have famous venture capitalists, less so in Europe. Certainly in the US, I mean, you have Shark Tank, which is the equivalent of Dragon's Den show. And really, we are the more exciting version of private equity. We go into companies at a very, very sort of early stage of their life, and you get very, very different sort of venture capitalists. You know, people are putting in $250,000, into the US, where they could be putting in $200-300 million.
Right.
Which means that obviously the companies that they're investing into are at a much different sort of stage of their life. So yeah, we're the people who you give part of your company away to, or as I prefer to say, sell part of your business to. Hopefully, a good VC is a good business partner as well.
Right, cool. So the Dragon's Den model is something I'm sure most people are familiar with. So it's basically people with money helping new businesses get off the ground.
Well, that could be an angel. I mean, usually if you're a VC, tends to be somebody who's investing somebody else's money.
Right.
So yeah, a company will typically would raise an angel round, which could be from a group of angels or friends and family. I always kind of joke and say, well, regardless of what goes wrong, they'll still be your family. They may not be your friends when they're giving you their money. And the VC tends to be, their kind of second or the third round of capital that will go into a business. And that's more European. That can be a little bit different in the US.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
We're starting now to see more and more VCs, understandably, get interested in this category. So a couple of specialist firms in Europe, firms in the US who've been doing it for 5-7 years, investing into the category, building up their own sort of respective domain knowledge. So yeah, a good VC should really understand the categories that they're investing into, possibly some sort of previous operating experience in that category as well.
Great, well thank you for that. That's the first definition I'll ask from you. It won't be the last. So tech is at the heart of everything. I think it's probably quite difficult to have a business that doesn't involve some kind of tech in this day and age. How do you, from your experience so far, feel that tech is fitting into cannabis, and how do you think it's going to shape?
Well, it will be a fundamental driver of adoption. I would say that tech right now is not omnipresent. It doesn't run concurrently through this product, and that's for a lot of reasons. There are certain tech companies who cannot serve cannabis industry. They are restricted from serving that category. There are bank financial institutions who cannot serve. There are payment gateways who cannot serve it. So we as a category don't necessarily have all of the same technology payment stacks available to us, and we're excluded from, many of the different sort of banking platforms which are out there. And also we haven't really seen a lot of people who have come into the category and built technology specifically for the category and looked at the category and saw, what does this category need? And what do I mean by that? If you take, say, let's say take Airbnb and call that a category, it's defined this very, very notion of shared economy and shared property. But now you don't just have Airbnb, you have all sorts of technology companies which are servicing Airbnb, and that could be a company who've gone out and manufactured a lock which is specifically for Airbnb properties, somebody who's managed a payment system, a reservation system, a tablet device which will be available for you so you can explore the property, explore the neighborhood. So, these kind of interesting niches are yet to really start to be serviced with technologists coming into the cannabis industry and applying technology. And that, I think, is super, super exciting for somebody who's really passionate about the category and the benefits, but also about technology and how technology can play a fundamental part in the growth of a category. Just simply making it easier for consumers to enjoy that category.
Yeah, and I think we've learned over the last sort of couple of months of speaking to various people that actually it's quite hard to boil cannabis down to a single category. It's obviously a group title for a number of categories, and those are all developing at different paces. So what cannabis looks like in North America in terms of an industry is very different to how it is in Europe and how it is in Israel, how it is in Australia.
Absolutely. And again, technology has to work around kind of regulatory wrappers. Just because you've developed a technology product which is built around a regulatory need for the Canadian market, that doesn't in any shape or fashion mean that product is going to be applicable for the European market. Unlike, pick some other acronyms, KYC and AML, Know Your Customer Anti-Money Laundering, those standards are relatively similar across all jurisdictions. But these are standards and requirements which are very, very state specific. So that's going to be challenging because obviously as a technology company, tend to want what you're building to be applicable to the largest audience with the fewest modifications of your technology, because the more times you modify it, the more challenges that's ultimately going to present when you want to scale that technology for more and more people to use it.
So take the lesson from that ultimately the tech will be driving an easier consumer or customer experience. Given where we are in the UK and in Europe, i.e. at the relatively early stages, that's almost not shaped yet.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at sort of, the kind of very early uses of mobility for the cannabis space in the US, I think like weed maps, where you could go and locate the nearest dispensary. And it was pretty simple application, kind of same thing which had been used by McDonald's to allow you to find your nearest burger joint. We currently do not, and I can't see for quite some time that we're going to have physical dispensaries popping up all over Europe. Will that kind of product be needed in the European market? Probably not for quite some time.
Right.
It could well be that there are other technologies which are more applicable. This could be around, working with patients to allow them to have prescriptions which are signed, given to them digitally, which they can then pass over to a dispensary. So products which are going to fit more around the medicinal rather than the adult use cannabis space.
Yeah, the health tech angle, I think, seems quite
a
more obvious one in this jurisdiction.
Yeah, we've seen incredible levels of awareness and adoption of CBD. Not quite what we've seen happen in the US, but the same sort of challenges and problems which are occurring in the US are exactly the same problems and challenges which are occurring in the European and other markets. And that's consumers need to have a really, really solid on-ramp into CBD in terms of, finding high-quality CBD products, being able to verify that those CBD products are actually what they're claiming to be in terms of their form and their substance. And that's just, that's not a challenge which is individual to the US market. I would say that's pretty much a global one. And that for us was where we really started to kind of look in terms of the problems that we wanted to solve with technology. Were problems which were pretty much global.
That's a really good way to look at it. And obviously, every business wants to scale. So clearly, as you say, you want to look at the biggest addressable market with the least amount of modification. So yeah, that's really kind of useful summary. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So you've been sort of involved in a few kind of nascent industries over the years. Are there any parallels you can draw with what you're seeing in cannabis?
Yeah, parallels being, I'm guessing that there's an investor FOMO, fear of missing out.
Right.
Companies which are able to raise, lots of capital at very impressive valuations without yet having any demonstrable product or clear route to revenue. The kind of things that would not be forgiven in a more mature sector are being forgiven in this particular category. That doesn't always tend to work out all that well. And that's where I go back to sort of elements of history repeating themselves. Having, sort of first got involved in the dot-com sector in sort of late 90s.
You're going to use the word bubble there, I think.
Yeah, and, watching companies pivot from being a direct-to-consumer business. I worked for a company which had this crazy idea of 140 characters and an @ symbol, and messages got posted to a wall, and consumers were just like, what the hell is this? This makes no sense at all. And the business ended up successfully pivoting across to becoming a B2B company, providing the very, very early wall-gardened services that you discover on your mobile phone, and that sort of AOL, but run by kind of Vodafone or T-Mobile, something like that. So yeah, I've been lucky to sort of see 2 or 3 of the technology hype cycles.
And there's a bit of that here then?
Yeah, this is very sort of, it isn't quite the same. And I suppose when you put your kind of VC hat back on again, and you're looking at categories which have got really high degrees of consumer awareness. Everybody's heard of the product that you're talking about. Everybody will have an opinion on it. Their opinions are going to vary massively. Some of them are going to be really well informed. Some of them are going to be really poorly informed. But nobody's going to say, what's that? Never heard of it. So it's really unique in that respect.
Yeah.
In that, you're talking about a product which has got 50, 60 years worth of prohibition, criminalization, and now a changing attitude in some sets of society. And obviously in other sets of society, a hardening of the opposition of the actual product itself. So yeah, it's really fascinating in that, and that's something you've not really had in technology. So you've got that kind of hype cycle of changing attitudes, but this is not like sort of people going, what's this smartphone? Why would I want apps? I don't quite understand it.
Yeah.
What will they do? I don't really get this idea of taking a picture of all of my food and then sort of changing the colour of it. That doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I suppose, the big differentiator.
And whilst I agree with a lot of that, I think, and certainly in terms of virtually everyone has heard of this, I do think it's quite misunderstood. And that's the bit where I find it very interesting, because you're breaking it down and saying, well, cannabis that you thought is this sort of very homogenous, it's a drug, gets you high.
Yeah.
You can't do anything, whatever, you're comatose, whatever it is you like to describe it as. It's actually way vaster than that and way more nuanced. And, what's CBD, what is hemp, what's medical, different strains will do different things to you.
I almost think when you look at kind of medical cannabis, it's almost got a bit of a branding issue in that the stigma of the term cannabis almost overdrives the word medical. So it's, I think, too late. If I was the branding agency who were coming along to consult on medical cannabis, I'd probably say, I'm really sorry, it's going to be a question of re-education rather than rebranding. I think it's going to be a really fascinating thing with CBD. That CBD will become almost, I believe, an umbrella term for all of the different variants that are going to start to be discovered, and more investment going into strain discovery, and CBD becomes an umbrella term.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. So we'll come to talk about Cobidol in a minute, but other than your own business, obviously, what other tech businesses have you seen in the industry that you think are quite exciting?
We don't have huge amounts, so I guess most of them have probably been around consumption morphology, so they're a mixture of software and hardware. I'm a big fan of what PAX have done.
So packs are a dry herb vaporizer.
Yeah, and the team have done an incredible amount of work got some of the very, very early patents, developed some products which are on the nicotine side of things. But I love what they've done. I thought there was a smirky sort of, trying to think of the right term, but they raised $420 million in their last round of financing, right, which I thought was a great number to call. The
420 reference.
So I love what they're doing. Very, very well capitalized, incredible story in terms of when you look at which product they actually developed first, what then came out. There's been a couple of companies who've come to market in the blockchain space at the height of the kind of the ICO crypto boom. Haven't really sort of seen the products that they were originally, sort of talking about start to sort of manifest. Really, this category is really sort of wide open for technologists to apply their skills for, this particular vertical.
Great. Yeah. Gadgets. That's the tech that I've seen a lot around. Yeah. And actually the industry at the moment is quite well disposed to gadgets and the consumers with it. Yeah. So, the PAX is a very good example of that. Okay, cool. So let's talk about Cobidol, which is a blockchain business. Now, here's my second question for you of the day in terms of defining
this
things.
This is going to be the much harder one to define.
So can you tell us what blockchain is, and can you do it without me having to bang my head against the wall and or making me fall asleep?
Right. Oh my goodness me. So many challenges. Blockchain is a way of recording information where a number of parties are record keepers of the information, and then those parties agreeing that the information that they have recorded is an accurate record. Where is this beneficial, I think, is probably...
So let's give a really simple example. You buy a house from me, let's say.
Yeah.
Is that a simple example? Let's try that one. You buy a house from me and the blockchain records this transaction and a number of people keep these records.
Yeah, I mean, a property transaction is problematic at the moment, certainly in the UK, because of some of the rules around what parts of a transaction actually have to be signed with wet ink. But if we could actually do everything digitally, it would be a great example. Right. Because what actually it allows for all of the participants in the transaction to do is to verify that what they are required to do has taken place. So what does that mean? That will be the surveyor's report has been placed on the ledger, and then the next party in the transaction, which could be the mortgage company, who wishes to see the surveyor's report before they actually approve the mortgage or release the funds, can do that. And then all of the different sort of counterparties who are involved, from a legal perspective, can all actually take a view and see that the transactions are being fulfilled in the way that they are obliged to fulfill them. And it's about where it really comes into its own is where you have parties who are not known to each other and don't have any reason to trust each other, can actually digitally trust each other, because all of the documentation which relates to a transaction is placed into a ledger which all of those parties can see. Once that information has been placed in that ledger, it can't be changed and it can't be removed.
So effectively, it's providing a level of trust that underpins a transaction or an exchange of something.
Yeah, I mean, but blockchain can also be really well used in, and the category that we kind of look at, and the one that you'll hear me sort of talk about, is provenance. It's actually using it as a way of proving that all of the documentation is legitimate and cannot then be changed at a later time. And a number of people who are involved in the transaction have certain rights and privileges which they pass to the next person. So there is this order of service which has to take place before a transaction is effectively completed.
Yeah.
And the transaction being completed will be, say, for a consumer or a regulator to look at that transaction. And by that, I don't mean a financial transaction. By that, I mean a business process. Mm-hmm. And they can look at it and say, you know what? This is actually what I thought I was buying, or for a regulator, what I thought I was approving.
Mm. Okay, cool. Well, hopefully that explains things in relation to blockchain. How does this apply to cannabis and Cobidol?
Yeah, well, I mean, the category that we're focused on is CBD. We think it's obviously generally unregulated, which has led to quite a few opportunists coming into the space. Some of them, being well intentioned, some of them being bad actors, and this is again where I think you start to see things like blockchain actually having quite a lot of benefits in terms of ensuring that trust, transparency and visibility have to be built into somebody's production pathology. I don't think there is a single positive report which has been published across the trade press, across the consumer press, around the quality of blind purchased CBD, which has then been subsequently lab tested. And those numbers range from the low 30s to the high 70%, products which simply do not reflect the products that the consumer believes they're about to consume.
And that's obvious. That in the most obvious way, that is not it. Basically, what's in the bottle isn't what is on the label.
Correct. And in some cases, it could be brown sugar water that somebody's buying, but actually, it could actually be quite detrimental to somebody's health as well, because it could have real high levels of heavy metals in there. So. It isn't just a question of a consumer has spent $80, $100 and has effectively just been sold rubbish. They could have spent $80 to $100 and they're actually consuming toxins.
Right.
So, I think it's really, really important for the sector to build out that trust and build out that transparency and allow for consumers to start to understand what's actually in the product that they are about to consume. And that's where blockchain has some kind of real benefits.
And Cobidol is going to solve these problems through providing a decentralized database.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of different ways that we're looking at things. So we have Spectra, which is our consumer-facing mobile application, which we're aiming to launch in the UK, probably sometime around September time. So that means if you've got an iPhone or an Android device, you can download Spectra. You can tell it a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and then we will curate different CBD brands who have committed to uploading their data into Cobidol, which is our provenance platform. And we made a very, very bold statement and commitment when we started to make our first announcements, in that Cobidol is completely free to anybody who's involved in the CBD market. It doesn't matter if you're a cultivator, it doesn't matter if you're an extractor, it doesn't matter if you're a brand, if you're somebody who's buying white labels. We want, for people who are committed to quality and transparency to have this product available as part of their tool set, so that consumers can actually get an honest view on how good your products actually are.
But you have certain requirements of such cultivators and sellers, right? They need to provide you with test results?
Yeah, there are a number of different stages of data, and there's obviously, depending on the organisation, some of those stages will be things that they manage completely themselves, or it could be that they only control one part of the value chain, and in which case they will need to ask their business partners, which could be people to the left and to the right, to also participate. So there is quite a commitment, but it does allow for a consumer with a high degree of confidence to verify all of the statements that are being made. And, where we would really like to see technology going is what we would call chip-to-chip. So, this is an IoT sensor, an Internet of Things sensor, which is sitting in the soil, monitoring the soil, feeding into the blockchain the quality of the soil that the product has been grown in. And then, rather fantastically, last week, Apple announced as part of iOS 13 that they will open up access to NFC, near-field communication, which actually then means that we can put an NFC chip in the actual bottle box. So a consumer can actually then tap their phone on the box, on the bottle, which you can currently do with Android. You just couldn't do it with iPhone, but now that's going to change. And then, we can create this complete picture in terms of where the product actually started life, where it was cultivated and where it's finished, and the positive benefits that product is actually having on the consumer, because they can also feed into our platform, how CBD is affecting.
Great. I think, obviously we'd support anything that ensures a higher level of transparency and provenance and basically promotes quality.
Yeah, and what we found, is there's a good number of companies who are already massively committed to this. They're so passionate about the quality of the products that they produce they're just deeply frustrated because there is really no way for them to actually to show to consumers that, their product, which may be 20% more expensive than another product, is far superior. There's simply no way for them to do that at the moment. And this provides, the digital tool set to allow them to really kind of go out there and shout loud and proud about the quality of the product that they're producing.
Great. Cool. Okay. Well, let's just talk a bit about your kind of background, I guess, and what made you, I think you've got fingers in a few pies, but what made you sort of look at cannabis to begin with? What sort of led you to it?
Yeah. So I have my co-founder and our chief product officer who's based in Toronto, so thanks for taking me on this journey. But our working relationship goes back 20 years, and we stayed in contact. And then I live between London and Malta. One of the Maltese families I know said, there's going to be some interesting legislation happening here in Malta. We're really excited about looking at it. Would you happen to know anybody in the space? Because we would like some sort of advice. And I said, well, as it happens, my business partner, Richard Skaife, set up the Hemp News 10 years ago. He's been involved in some of the most successful Canadian IPOs. Let me see if he fancies having some Mediterranean sun. So he came to Malta, spent some time there. We became reacquainted with each other. We just sort of started to kick around, said, look, we're both technologists, but you have obviously this amazing domain expertise in this category. What's broken? What do we kind of need to fix? Because I'm a big believer in solving problems which are real, which need to be fixed. And that's quite challenging if you're coming to a domain which you're relatively new to.
Yeah. So
I've been very, very lucky in, having somebody who can look at it and, stroke his white hair and say, dear boy, these are the things which we need to fix together. We've been very, very fortunate in terms of being able to access, the upper echelons of the cannabis industry in Europe and, in the US and Canada, talking to people who've been involved from the very, very sort of nascent early days. Really interesting sort of listening to their opinions in terms of where their markets have gone right, where their markets have gone wrong, where they see similarities in our markets, where they see certain trends reoccurring, where they see opportunities, where they see risks, and then sort of boiling all of that down into, developing a technology stack which has been specifically designed to serve the CBD industry.
Great, that's a nice little story about reacquainting with old sparring partners. And yeah, I think, obviously if you've got experience from Canada, then that's probably a really good template to sort of take to Europe as well.
Incredible learning.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to finish off now by asking my traditional question, which is, what did your family say when you said you were looking into a cannabis business?
This is a wonderful story because actually one of my family members had really positive impact with CBD. We were sat at the Christmas dinner table and they told me that they'd been using CBD. And this was about the same time I kind of decided that this would be a really interesting sort of technology journey to go on. And they sat there and they described all of the challenges that they'd had with finding the right CBD products, setting out what type of CBD they should be using, the consumption, the delivery mechanism, all of these frustrations. And I was like, this is incredible because all of the things that we're aiming to build with technology fix all of the consumer issues that you have just described.
Right.
So, yeah. It was,
so it wasn't difficult.
No, it was...
in fact, inspirational.
Incredible serendipity. When, the problems that somebody's had in terms of getting... And they've had amazing benefits from the...
Yeah, they've had meaningful health benefits.
Yeah, from it as well. But just explaining all the challenges that they had to get to that point, and then being able to look at it and say, we really are sort of going in the right direction because, these are all challenges which can be solved with technology.
Great.
So great validation.
Yeah,
and I wasn't thrown out after the business.
I'm glad to hear it. That's really good. Thank you, Richard. And thank you for kind of giving us a really good overview. And hopefully people will understand a bit more about blockchain and, like me, understand a bit more about what venture capital is. We'd love to see you back here again to talk about Cobidol at some point when it's up and running.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks for joining us on that show. I think it's really exciting how this new tech is getting involved in cannabis. There's so many new opportunities that are happening, and hopefully this particular piece of technology will help to raise the standards of products on the market for consumers. It's been a really busy week for me. It's European Cannabis Week this week in London, and the last 2 days I've spent at the Cannabis Europa conference down on the South Bank on the river in London. Loads of politicians, doctors, scientists and other industry leaders from all around the world coming to talk about the state of the cannabis industry in Europe. So very fitting for my podcast. I met tons of interesting people, and I recorded some podcasts at the actual conference. So over the next few weeks you'll hear some of those. There's more events happening in London this week, so please check out the European Cannabis Week Festival website, which I'll put a link to. This is also a very important week for me on a personal level because I will be quitting my day job at the end of this week as a media lawyer to focus solely on cannabis projects. Not entirely sure how that will go, but I've been overwhelmed with the response I've got from launching this podcast and the connections I've made and the opportunities that are sort of coming towards me. So I feel very lucky, and it feels like now is the time to make the plunge. Let's see how it goes. So if you need a commercial or legal consultant for your cannabis business, drop me a line. Anyway, shameless sales pitch over now. As always, subscribe if you're liking the show, and please share with your friends, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.